everyone, it's Becky here. Today I'm going to talk to you about making a circle jig. It's going to be a little bit experimental because I'm trying to kind of change a design that I'd already made to make it fit my bandsaw and to fit my needs. So I'll talk to you a little bit about why I'm making it and what it does, and then you'll be able to watch the process of me making it. Hopefully it will all work out and you'll be able to have a go yourselves. One of the things that I really wanted to make when I started doing some woodwork was a wooden rainbow. And it took me ages to work out how people do it. So when I bought a scroll saw, one of the first things I did was got onto the scroll saw, used a compass to map out my curves, and created this vaulted beech rainbow here. It's a really lovely piece of wood. I was really pleased with the design. I wanted to do it justice. So I was slow and careful, but I had two big issues. To start with, cutting it out on the scroll saw took absolutely ages, especially with a thicker piece of wood like this. Secondly, it's not bad, but you can see it's not perfect. The lines aren't exactly geometrical curves. There's gaps in the wood where I went a bit wrong, bits that go a bit thicker and thinner, flatter kind of tops, and it took me a long time to sand it down to the level I wanted. Although it doesn't look too bad, I personally feel this isn't a level of an item that I would be happy to sell. So wanted to go a bit further with it. After posting a picture of it on a local woodworking page, somebody recommended that I look up circle jigs. So I started to do loads of research, and I found that all the videos, you needed a chop saw, you needed specialist equipment, this, that and the other. I just didn't have those things. So I adapted from what I saw, and this was the first version that I made. Not perfect, but it wasn't awful either. It did the job. Two major issues with this. First of all, there was nothing to kind of clamp it down onto the surface of the table of my bandsaw, so there was a bit of movement as I was working, or I was clamping it in place and the clamps were getting in the way. So that wasn't ideal. And secondly, there just wasn't enough holes. It wasn't big enough. So you can see I made both the flat rainbow here and my curved rainbow. And for the outer pieces, I had to cut them by hand. Not ideal, you know, you want everything to be even, but the curves that it did make, the bits that I could cut, I was really happy with. So I wanted to make something similar, but much larger. And that's my plan for today. I plan to adapt my original idea, find some sort of way to hold it onto the bandsaw, hold it in place, but to give me a greater option of curves to cut. I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing, so it will be a bit of trial and error, but we'll see how I get on. Yeah, so one of the problems I faced with this, when I put it together, I was kind of using the wood I had available, is I found that once I'd slid it in, there was then quite a bit of movement with it. It wasn't fixed, so I've been having to clamp it on this side onto the table, meaning that when I'm trying to move my wood around, there's a clamp in the way and I'm having to take it off, and it's not ideal, so the cut isn't as clean as I want it to be. So this time, I'm going to try and create sort of like batons around the edge, so that it slots over the top of the table and it holds it in place. Only when I came to cut my wood a few minutes ago, I have stupidly cut it exactly the size of the table with my 30cm overhang. That means that I can't put the wood underneath like I wanted, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do at the minute. I'm thinking maybe just nailing onto the side there so I'm not wasting any wood. So as far as sizing my wood, it was a bit of trial and error, not quite so much as last time, because at least now I know what I need. But I started by measuring the table, and as I said a minute ago, obviously I measured it too short. I should have added an extra, I don't know how big is this, couple of centimetres either side to fit the wood on. But measured it out and then did 30cm from the blade to the edge plus a little more, because I want to be able to make rainbows and circles up to kind of 30cm in diameter. So I'm going to hammer in the edges that will help me slot it over the table, and I'm hoping I've got the right size nails, because last time I had my potted nails out, I threw the entire selection of nails across the garden by accident. Don't know if you've ever tried to pick up about 500 nails, but it's impossible. They've got completely mixed and gone a bit rusty, so they're not ideal, but they'll do the job for this. So I'm now going to repeat that on the two sides. I'm only doing 3 sides because I'm going to place a baton in underneath that can be slid into the bandsaw and help everything align up. Just realised how disgusting that bit of wood is on the back, but it's only for a jig, so it will do the job. So So for the next stage, I'm going to make this incision here, which is where the bandsaw blade will sit. Now, for this, I'm using this edge bit here as a bit of a guide to kind of keep it straight and level, and I am going to have to cut into this bit here, but that's absolutely fine. I'm going to make a straight incision as far as it takes me to go so that I reach the edge of the table. That was harder work than it was on the last one, trying to keep it straight. So you can see it kind of clumps down at the edge, and I've now got three very secure sides, and that isn't going anywhere apart from where it just went. One more bit I want to add in, which is going to be a guide, like on this one, that I could use to thread through. It's just another area of security to kind of keep everything clamped in place. So for these edges, I used 15 by 20mm wooden baton, and I cut some of that down for me to use on this one here, so that it would slide through the feeder just here. I think that one's the one that's the right size, actually. There we go. So you can see I've made it as high as the table. You don't want it to sit any higher, and as wide as that gap. I did have to trim a little bit more off because you want it to kind of slide through fairly evenly. I'm now going to mark it and cut it down to be the same length as my baseboard. I've cut that bit to size, and it now kind of slides really nicely up and down in that section there. That's now going to be attached to the base of my board, and it then means I've got 4 anchor points to keep that as still as possible. And I won't end up like I did with this, with that kind of wobble, and you can see here where the blade's cut where it shouldn't, and it's gone a little bit too far. So it should keep everything as smooth as possible. So I'm going to put the board back on, and I'm going to mark where I want that to go. And I'm going to go back over to the workbench, and I'm just going to nail that bit on again. Okay, so we'll take it back over to the bandsaw, and hopefully now everything should slot in place nicely. In theory it should. Let's have a look and see. Ah, look at that, perfect. And that's nice and secure, meaning that I'll be able to move my work around on the platform without any movement. So I'm really, really pleased that that's worked out. The next step is to put in the holes for the pivotal point. Now, I just used the press drill for this, and these holes were a little bit big. My pivot is made from these kind of furniture foot stoppers that I just picked up cheaply in B&Q. The rounded bit was way too big for what I wanted, so just using a pair of scissors and a knife and almost taking off a few fingers, I broke that rubber seal off and took it off, which gives me this nice flat pin. And you can see on the one I made previously, it sits inside that hole, and that becomes your pivot there. As you can see, this is a bit big. The holes I drilled were a little on the large side because originally I was using a screw, so I'm going to make slightly smaller holes this time. It doesn't fit. I've just found out how small my press drill actually is. The one I made last time was a lot smaller, so I managed to drill everything on the press drill. I'll have to move over to my really rubbish, cheap Argos hand drill, so I'm not quite sure how well that will go, but we'll give it a try and see. It's just a Guild one from Argos. I think it cost me about 18 quid. We'll have to see if it's going to be good enough to do this job, so fingers crossed. The final step is to add in the countersink hole. That means that the pin will then sit flush to the bottom. It's not kind of sticking out, it's not scraping on the metal of the bandsaw. So I'll add that in. So I've flipped my board around, it's now sitting upside down, and I'm going to see if this drill's good enough to do the countersink holes. all finished, so I will clean all the sawdust out and we'll move over to the bandsaw and hopefully everything should be working. We'll give it a spin. I'm going to start by making a circle just from a piece of scrap plywood. It's just a piece that I cut off when making my jig, just to check that everything's working okay. I've put that piece of plywood underneath, I've worked out where I want the central point of my circle to be, and I'm just going to hammer this pin in. Now obviously when you do use a circle jig, it means that you end up with a little hole in the wood, but I found that filling it with a little bit of wood filler, it soon disappears, especially as most of the items I make are going to be painted. You don't see it in the end. So you can now see that piece of material's on there, and you can see how it pivots from a central point. So it will meet the blade here, and it should cut perfectly round a circle. That worked perfectly. As you can see, I've now got a perfect circle. I'm really pleased with the results of that. You can see how cleanly it's cut, and this isn't the best wood either. I just need to pull it off the pin, and you can see, aside from a small hole there that I will sand down and fill with wood filler, got a really perfect circle shape. We'll give it a try and see how we get on with cutting a rainbow. I've put on a plank of wood this time. Rather than going to the central pivotal point, my pivotal point is down towards the bottom of the piece of wood, and I've just marked the halfway point. That will then allow me just to get a half circle curve, which I need for making rainbows. And you'll see it will go forward and just cut a half circle into the wood. So let's give it a try. Nailed it in too well again. I'm really pleased with the cut that the circle jig's made on this semicircle that's going to be a rainbow. You can see it's left a very minimal hole in this wood. There's no splitting. You'll just keep using that hole and move it to different points along the circle jig in order to get your inner rings. The only tip I would give you is just go really slow on the bandsaw. If you try and force it, you tend to find you don't get as neat a circle as you would like. You're also at risk of snapping out your bandsaw blade. So slow and easy is the best way to be. I've had a bit of a play around this afternoon with the circle jig. It's been really good fun. I managed to make another rainbow stacker, and I'm thinking that this might have something to do with the sea. Something sea related, to do with different layers of the ocean, so I'll paint that up later on. And then just this little stacking toy. I must admit it looks a bit like a wedding cake at the minute, so I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with it, but just to give you an idea of what kind of things you could do with it. Best of luck making your own circle jigs. I'd love to see your circle jigs, and I'd love to see what kind of things you make with the circle jig. So please search for me on Facebook. I'm Becky Builds, and share your photos over there. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time.